goes 0-3. Look, we can revisit, I think, a lot of the things we talked about in Game 2 that happened last Saturday, our first red and gold post-game show of the year. But I'll be honest with you, it feels good that tonight was the end of all the fake games, if you will, the exhibition games, the ones that don't count, and let's be honest, the games we can't take too much from. And I did make a list of things I wanted to go over, things I noticed, positives, of course, but also a lot of negatives, because this game was ugly. You know, the 34-21 final doesn't really do it justice. This was a blowout, nearly from start to finish. And I will say there are exciting aspects to the third and final preseason game, because rookies get out there a little bit more. Guys that are on the bubble get to showcase. I mean, hell, Kadarius Toney had a couple of good snaps tonight. I don't think that necessarily means the best thing for him, because the longer he's out there, the less of a chance he has to actually make this roster. Now, maybe you were already there, and it didn't really matter whether Kadarius Toney made or didn't make the roster. But Sky Moore wasn't really out there tonight. That, to me, shows that his roster spot is fine. McCole Hardman was out there a little bit tonight, but I still think his roster spot is fine. But it was an opportunity for some of these guys that were still fighting for a spot, maybe even a spot on the practice squad, or to showcase themselves to other teams out there that are looking for a little extra help, a little extra depth at certain positions. I'll tell you, I think Cornell Powell did a really good job in these last two preseason games. Now, that can be a positive you take away. I thought Ian Book responded very well from the way he looked last Saturday against the Detroit Lions. 2 really good drives tonight. Had a long pass to Montrell Washington there at the end. Look, I understand I'm going over the number 3s and the number 4s in the depth chart. Right? I know I'm doing that. And the next time we have this red and gold post-game show, it's going to be the real deal. What we're talking about will mean a lot more than what I'm saying tonight, because tonight was really just your opportunity to watch some football. That's as plain as I can put it. Maybe if you stuck around to the fourth quarter, you're seeing guys out there you've never heard the name of before. But it was also that opportunity in the first quarter for guys like Deneric Prince, guys like Lucas Niang on the line, defensively guys like Felix Enrique-Uzama to get a couple of drives here and there, a couple of really good snaps just to feel good about yourself going into the regular season. But this game just wasn't pretty. And I think what I would walk away with is this secondary's depth has really raised my eyebrows a little bit. Not in the good way. Now, let me be clear. I think one of my favorite standouts from tonight's game was Jaden Hicks. And Louis Riddick actually echoed that on Twitter, if you are somebody that likes to go on Twitter during the games, after the games. He thinks he's going to be a star in this league, a star in the making, as he would call it. And I've been very impressed by what number 21 has given this defense in the preseason, because these snaps are important to him. And I also think he's somebody that early on in the regular season, as early as week 1 against Baltimore, he's going to be out there. He's going to be thrown into the fire. Tonight he had a fumble recovery. He had 4 tackles. You know, he was known coming out of college to be a hard hitter. And I think that ability in coverage is only going to grow. But tonight I think he was the only one in the secondary that I was impressed with. I mean, Jalen Watson was out there a lot tonight. And I think, really, in part, that he missed a lot of camp. He was banged up. So you get the extra reps. And that was why I thought Jalen Watson was out there in the second half. But I didn't think Jalen Watson was that impressive tonight. In fact, I don't know if I'd even call it average. And I understand that preseason football is something you have to look at in such a different light. You know, sometimes you want to buy into what you're seeing. If it's something that's not so good, you say, well, it's preseason football. I'm not going to worry about it. It's something that doesn't really matter. And preseason football really doesn't when you're not playing starters that much or they get a drive or two. But tonight, I wanted to see the depth on defense because you can see a lot of rotations defensively in week 1, week 2, and week 3. And this preseason, we didn't see Chris Jones out there, and he's the game wrecker for this defense. You know, we don't get to see Trent McDuffie out there for longer than a drive or two. Tonight, though, was that hope for me of because this secondary and this cornerback group hadn't really received a lot of praise. I wanted to see somebody tonight shine. I wanted to see somebody tonight make a big play. And there were a few late in the fourth quarter. You had the strip and the fumble recovery, actually 2 of them. There was the special teams muff. That was the one I believe Jaden Hicks fell on. But I just wasn't overly impressed with the secondary. The Bears had a lot of chunk yardage. They ran the ball for the most part pretty well. Play action was solid for them. And I can live with a good pass here and there where they're just fitting it into a window. But there were a couple times, you know, even guys like Jalen Watson, who is going to be out there, was getting picked on and was giving up big receptions with 10 to 15 yards of cushion. And that's probably him still getting back into the flow of it. And that's what was important tonight for him. It's not good to see that, but this is preseason. This is just working out the issues, working out the flaws. I just don't know if I walk away from any 3 of those games feeling that great about some of the guys I was excited to see, some of the depth. I mean, Carson Steele stole the show in 2 of the games. Tonight he had an angry run. He ran the ball effectively. I could go as far to say at this point he's running back number 2. Now, they may keep Clyde. They may keep Deneric Prince. Maybe they can use him as a hybrid. I think you just call him a football player. Who knows how they're going to utilize Carson Steele, but he was a bright star in the preseason. But other than that, I'm not sure I could take some of the momentum from the Lions game offensively, from some of those depth pieces, and saw them carried into this game. This was not a well-rounded football game. Showed some fight in the end, some of the guys that are fighting for roster spots. But this one was ugly. And they didn't win a single game in the preseason, and only one of them was really that close. And that's why I want to be very clear here, and why I can't wait for that home opener, the NFL opener, because you really just scrap all of this. There's nothing you can take away from preseason football. There's just things we can talk about. And that's what this post-game show is here for. It's here for you to maybe voice your displeasures, things you're happy about, things you're concerned about. Don't get me wrong. I'm not panicking or feeling any sense of dread for a 0-3 preseason. It doesn't matter. They barely played the starters, but there were some guys I wanted to see, take that jump from year to year. I thought to kick off this game, the first defensive series, I wanted to see somebody like Cam Jones, who was fighting to make the roster for a second year, have a really good game. And he gets flagged on the opening drive. Kelvin Joseph gets flagged twice and leads to an opening drive touchdown for the Bears. That's something where I go, man, if I'm Steve Spagnuolo, I'm not feeling too good about that opening drive. 3 penalties, guys out of position, some missed tackles, not a lot of pressure on the quarterback. And yes, that's the reserve group. Those are the number 2s and the number 3s, but some of those guys are going to have to get out there and play. And you want to see them overpower somebody in a preseason game, because that's what this is, right? My goal as somebody watching this game, when I am evaluating who's out there, when I see Felix Anudike-Uzomah out there, I see Jalen Watson out there, I see Kadarius Toney out there, and he had 2 great catches tonight, or maybe 2 good routes tonight. We can call it that. I want to see the domination from the guys that are going to make this team and are going to get meaningful snaps. I don't want to see them get bullied by somebody who's not going to make the team or is going to be on the practice squad. You want to see the good reps there. Phone line is 913-381-0810. That's 913-381-0810. It's late. It's an ugly game. But if there's anything that's on your mind, listening on the car ride home, or you're just listening at your house, or wherever the hell you may be listening, is there anything that's concerning to you? Any depth pieces you're not as high on anymore, or somebody that's impressed you? If we do get a phone call, I'm sure it's going to be about Carson Steele. Or maybe you can make a case now for Kadarius Toney. Because when Kadarius Toney caught that 20-yard pass, I'm going, man, that's felt like the first time in a long time. And maybe the last time we see Kadarius Toney catch a pass in a Chiefs uniform. A little bit later on in the Red and Gold postgame show, we'll talk with Matt Derrick. We'll get his thoughts on who we think is going to be cut. Whether you are listening in the car ride home or you're watching on Twitch, thank you for tuning in to Sports Radio 810 WHB. All season long, we're going to have the Red and Gold postgame show. Right as that game concludes, you can pop over here and you can hear what Dylan and I have to say about the outcome of the Chiefs game. And tonight, this is the last time we're just running through the motions of this depth chart and our takeaways and our thoughts. Because, Dylan, we did this, I want to say, maybe once last year. I might have done a preseason game last year. It was the year before that. It's hard to truly form an opinion on a preseason game because you don't want to go over the line of I'm in panic mode because this guy didn't look good or this defense didn't look good or the play calls weren't as good because they're not showing much. Those are all the basic plays for the third-string quarterback tonight in Chris Oladokun and the fourth-string quarterback in Ian Book. They're keeping it simple. It's just guys playing football out there. Can you beat your guy one-on-one? Can you find the holes? Can you have a high football IQ? That's what this is. But at the same time, I don't know if I want to walk away from 3 preseason games and say there's zero I can take away. There's absolutely nothing I can take away from these 3 games. We know that the Chiefs are likely not going to go 0-3 at any point this season. Like I'd bet good money they do not lose 3 in a row this year. So this means nothing in terms of the record. We understand that. But I don't know. I think there's a part of me going, some of these guys needed to show me a little bit more. Even if they're not going to be out there this year, I would like to have that confidence in the number 2 or the number 3 at a certain position of, hey, if bleep does hit the fan and you go out there, I want to have some confidence in you being able to do something. You know, even somebody like Lucas Niang, who has been a starter before at the NFL level, has never really stayed healthy. But let's say, in some scenario, he has to go out there. Right now, would you have really good confidence that he could give you good reps, good snaps in a game as big as the Baltimore one, or Cincinnati, or Sunday Night Football against the Falcons, or later on in the year in the AFC West battle, or maybe against the 49ers in San Francisco? Could you feel that confidence? That's what I'm talking about here. Or on special teams, right? Somebody like McCole Hardman. You know, honestly, he didn't do a ton in the preseason, but I feel pretty confident at this point in time that he could provide you value just on special teams. Maybe doesn't get out there as much offensively as a wide receiver, but I feel fine with him. I'm not saying Jalen Watson's performance tonight makes me feel completely different about what Jalen Watson has done in his career in Kansas City. But I can't say I feel like he's really up to speed, right? Missed some time, you're banged up, you get out there in the preseason, you're having to stay out there for an extended period. That, to me, showed that Steve Spagnuolo and this coaching staff went, I want to get him some extra work here. And he had to stay out there for quite some time, and that's where I go, all right, maybe Jalen Watson's not going to be a guy right off the bat to be the number 2 cornerback. Because, Dylan, that is a big concern going into the season. Who's the number 2 cornerback? We know Trent McDuffie's number 1, but number 2 is up in the air. Is it Joshua Williams? Is it Jalen Watson? Every time we heard audio from Andy Reid or Steve Spagnuolo, they never really said, hey, so-and-so's taken that jump and they're our number 2 guy. They really don't have a cemented number 2, and I think that's going to come with progression. But Joshua Williams or Jalen Watson had the prime opportunity, more so Josh Williams, because Jalen Watson was banged up, to take that spot. Now, you go from L'Jarius Sneed as year 1 and McDuffie's year 2 last year. That was a big part of this defense in the secondary to limit the passing game. And after the preseason is concluded tonight, I'm not sold there really is a true number 2. What do you think about this cornerback group? Because if there's anything I walk away with tonight, it's that this depth in the secondary is just a little bit concerning to me at this point in time.
Yeah, I agree. And also, it's not great that the depth at the pass rushing position also is kind of concerning as well. Because
without
both
Omenihu.
of those are a great marriage usually, and one has to complement the other. Now, Chris Jones isn't playing, so he kind of, wrecks the game himself, so we're kind of hoping on that again. And the other thing is McDuffie's playing out of position again. Not really out of position, but he's changing positions too. So he's not even playing what he's been accustomed to in the NFL this season as well. So that adds another element of concern, I guess, on my end, just of the fact that we don't have a solid number 2. It would be a little less concerning because of it really already is, but I just want to add that to the, fold as well, that he's out of position. He's playing from slot to outside, which we don't know what that looks like even yet either.
He talked about it earlier this week about, he feels like it's nothing new for him. He can make that change. He wants to be able to adapt. He wants to be able to go up against bigger-bodied wide receivers. But a lot of that success that he was able to have last year has to be attributed to L'Jarius Sneed following around a true number 1. And I'm not concerned whatsoever about Trent McDuffie not being able to handle a number 1 wide receiver.
I don't think so either.
He can.
I just don't want him to have to handle a lacking number 2 position while he's trying to take over the number 1 cornerback role.
And that's where it becomes, that is where it becomes an issue to me. And you bring up the defensive line, right? You're going to have Chris Jones out there. You're going to have Derek Nottie. You're going to have George Karlaftis and Mike Dana. That, to me, is your front 4 on opening night. Then you have the rotations. You have Turk Wharton, who had a great camp, going to be one of those first guys in. Mike Pennell's there for your 3rd and short, right? Your 3rd and 2, your 3rd and 1. Felix Anudike-Uzomah is going to have to be one of those rotational guys. And, as raw as he is, as young as he is, this is one of those opportunities that he can really fill a great position with Charles Omenihu out. Even if it's only 4, 5, 6 weeks, this is your chance, your opportunity to make an impact. And tonight, he was out there on that opening drive. I thought he had a couple of good reps. But still, it's one of those things I go back to in the preseason when you have somebody out there that is a number 2 or number 3, and they're going up against the Bears number 2 or number 3. I'd love to see somebody dominate. I'd love to see somebody that is unblockable, right? You can't go one-on-one. You got to double-team this guy, and that's maybe more of a hope and a prayer than anything. I mean, tonight is an extreme example when Chris Oladokun is starting the football game, and I wanted to see Chris Oladokun do well. He didn't tonight. A lot of staring down, and Trent Green on the Chiefs television network, former Chief, of course, he's bringing up that he got picked off there because he was just staring right at that spot. He was staring down the receiver, and one of them was not a pick 6. It could have been. I mean, it was telegraphed. The second one, he got drilled on. But again, it was the stare down. It
missed his, blitz pickup, too.
Oh, yeah.
The protection slide, that's kind of the part of the quarterback position that is the hard part, and what separates greats is knowing the defense and knowing exactly when a corner is coming, even though they're not showing.
And that's maybe the frustrating part to me in preseason football is you're expecting too much from a number 3 or a number 4. I was very pleased with Ian Book tonight. I thought Ian Book had some good snaps. I don't think that he is making this roster, of course. I think they'll try to stash 2 quarterbacks on that practice squad, and we know it's Patrick Mahomes and Carson Wentz. Right, so let's pump the brakes if we have any harsh criticisms of Chris Oladokun. I actually like his future. I've been impressed with what he's been able to do, but tonight that was not a very, very pretty showing when he got the majority of the snaps in this one. But Chiefs fall 34-21 to the Chicago Bears. They go 0-3 in the preseason. Sound off if you want to. If you're angry, you're driving, you're pissed off, you're watching on Twitch, and you just want to comment something, I'm just kidding. You're probably not that upset. You're more so excited that the exhibition games are done, and the next thing on the docket, especially here on the Red and Gold Postgame Show, is opening night in the NFL. The Chiefs and the Ravens, a rematch of the AFC Championship game. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, Creed Humphrey getting an extension to stay in Kansas City, making him one of the highest-paid centers in the NFL. We'll talk about that a little bit next on the Red and Gold Postgame Show on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Carson Steele was the MVP of the Chiefs preseason, despite them going 0-3. Jaden Hicks probably gets silver. I was really impressed with what I saw from Jaden Hicks. Couple of missed tackles in the second preseason game last Saturday. Tonight, I thought he was really impressive. If I was looking for somebody to stand out defensively, like we were talking about in the opening segment, he was one of those guys, with as many snaps as he would have gotten, to do something with them, to continue to move his way up the depth chart. Right, and Justin Reid, though we fully expect him to be ready for week 1, who knows, how often Steve Spagnuolo is going to rotate with that defense, especially in the secondary. Right, the concerns of the number 2 cornerback, the concerns maybe of the safety depth. Those are things that we're factoring in right now. Like we all know after tonight, whether you're listening in your car, you're listening at your house, maybe you want to voice some of your opinions, things you're feeling good about, maybe things not so good about. 913-381-0810, that's 913-381-0810. Let us know your thoughts on the Chiefs' 34-21 loss to the Chicago Bears. They go 0-3 in the preseason. Or if you're watching on Twitch, hello to everybody out there watching on this live stream. Hopefully you've enjoyed it so far, but we know this is preseason football. I will say, I'm proud of myself in this go-round. I stayed standing. I can only do it for like 20 minutes in the first show because the sun was beating down into this room. It's nice and cool in here tonight, so I can easily stand up. I'm not sweating. None of that bad stuff. But if you're watching on the stream for Twitch, comment anything that you took away from this game. Maybe nothing at all, though, because none of the starters played. They were in T-shirt and shorts. They had hats on. They were joking on the sideline. But it was their opportunity to see some of these guys still fighting for a roster spot, try and make an impact. It was cool to see somebody like Cornell Powell follow up what I believe to be a pretty good performance against the Lions, and he had another touchdown grab tonight. It was the Chiefs' second touchdown of the game behind the Carson Steele dive up the middle, but he had set that up by a long 30-plus yard run in which he's trucking people, he's stiff-arming people. Carson Steele may very well be the team's number 2 running back. I wanted to see Derrick Prince really build off of what he did against the Lions. I would have loved to see Derrick Prince in that opening drive be utilized as the workhorse. It didn't happen, and that's something we saw last year with Derrick Prince. Derrick Prince never really got going in the preseason, but in this year, we saw him pop off a little bit in week 2. Had a long, catch and run, I think it was, or a run of 30, 35-plus yards. I think one of them was called back due to a holding call, but there were a couple of big plays number 34 had for Kansas City against the Lions. Tonight, not so much. It was Carson Steele doing the majority of the damage in the backfield, but we knew Carson Steele was already on the inside. He was somebody, honestly, that didn't need a lot of reps, in my opinion, tonight. And since we didn't really see Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the preseason, I can sit here and make a really good case that Carson Steele and his pet alligator will be a storyline going into week 1 against the Baltimore Ravens. This defense, you probably picked a few guys here and there that you wanted to see have a good night. And we'll talk a little bit later on in the show, probably to close up our show, with Matt Derrick about who is on the outside looking in. Are guys that we recognize, like Kadarius Toney, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, are they going to make this roster? We know some of the guys that are just 100% going to be cut, and we're probably going to be cut regardless of what they did in this game, because you can't keep everybody, right? There are going to be some guys they try to keep on the practice squad. There are some guys they're going to try and trade away to get some value. Last year they did that with Amir Smith-Marset, and he ended up having a special teams touchdown later that year for Carolina. This can happen for a couple of guys out there. One other name that I wanted to see have a good showing tonight was Nico Remigio, because I started to get this pitting feeling after last Saturday that maybe his spot isn't as secure as I once thought it was. I thought because of camp, and I thought because of the first preseason game in Jacksonville, that Nico Remigio would be somebody that the Chiefs wanted to keep on this roster. And Dave Toub said earlier this week, I'm pounding the table to get Nico Remigio on the 53-man roster. Maybe he holds on to that spot. Maybe Dave Toub's voice carries throughout that coach's office or in the locker room or in the front office, and they go, all right, Dave, if this is your guy, then we'll let you utilize him any way you want to on special teams. But I have a hard time seeing that because I think they're going to keep Sky Moore. I think they're going to keep McCole Hardman. And we know Xavier Worthy's going to be one of their guys in the special teams game. He's going to be a punt returner. He's going to be a kick returner. Carson Steele has been returning a couple of kicks. So where does Nico Remigio fall on the totem pole there? I mean, if you're going to be keeping Carson Steele, Xavier Worthy, which we know they're keeping Xavier Worthy, but guys like McCole Hardman and Sky Moore and Carson Steele, more of the guys that needed to have a good camp, had a good preseason. If those three guys were getting the majority of the reps in kick return and punt return, well, then I don't know how Nico Remigio makes this roster. I don't think Justin Ross makes this roster. And there are so many different guys offensively that I think you can like and have high hopes for, but it's a crowded room. I think the only thing that could aid somebody like a Nico Remigio or a Justin Ross is the simple fact, or I'll throw Kadarius Toney's name in there, is the simple fact that Hollywood Brown may begin the year not playing in week 1, maybe not playing in week 2, and you would need to carry an extra wide receiver. But do you carry the extra wide receiver or do you carry an extra tight end? Do you add Jared Wiley to this roster behind Travis Kelce and Noah Gray? These are all things they're going to have to be figuring out. And tonight, I just don't know if anybody that was on the bubble did enough to get on this 53-man roster. It did enough to give the coaches confidence in giving them a roster spot, whether it be on special teams, whether it be on offense, whether it be on defense. I had a couple of guys that I had written down as bubble guys. And this final game was their last shot to show why they're valuable, to show why you should use them. And to me, in Kansas City for bubble guys, there's no better way to get on this roster than to make an impact on special teams. If you're a gunner, if you're on kick return with this new format, and you are doing just enough to catch the eye of the coaches, and especially Dave Toub, that's going to be your path. That's going to be your shot to make the team. And of the guys I had written down, they didn't really do that for me. I mean, you think about it, going back to last Saturday, we were so high on somebody like Derrick Prince because Clyde Edwards-Helaire hadn't really been a consistent member of training camp in St. Joe, hadn't been playing at all in the preseason, and you think, okay, well, if that's the case, and we talked to Matt Derrick last week as well on this, is Clyde going to be a cut because of availability? And he's dealing with stuff that's more than just an injury or football, and he's, of course, got to take care of that, but for the Chiefs roster construction of the number 2 running back, look, Derrick Prince was one of those guys I had written down. But when Carson Steele is having 30-plus yard runs and he's out there and he's making, plays on special teams and he's returning kicks, I don't know how Derrick Prince becomes the number 2 running back over Carson Steele. And I think they would rather keep Clyde than they would Derrick Prince. And can you stash Derrick Prince on the practice squad? I guess we'll find out if that is the route they decide to go with. Nico Remigio was somebody that I had written down. McCole Hardman and Sky Moore just seem like guys that are going to make the roster. And maybe Patrick Mahomes has a pretty big say in that. I mean, he really likes McCole Hardman, and McCole Hardman is really close with a lot of these guys. There's a reason they brought him back again. He can impact on special teams, and Patrick Mahomes can have this connection with McCole Hardman when he's out there. Sky Moore, he's young enough. He's 23 years old. You may not be as high on Sky Moore, but I didn't get any indication tonight that he was in danger of losing his spot. He wasn't out there. Or if he was, I didn't see him. He might have gotten a few snaps here and there, but I mainly saw him on the sideline laughing with Patrick Mahomes. Kadarius Toney, he got more snaps than, if you're Kadarius Toney, you probably wanted, unless you're trying to increase your trade value to somebody else who's going to give you a shot. But it's unfortunate for Kadarius Toney that he didn't start making plays until the third preseason game. He does that on Saturday against Detroit. He does that against Jacksonville. We're talking about a totally different story here. We're talking about somebody that might have just shown that he's valuable to this offense, that he could be a piece you consider bringing back in. But this is going to be a very interesting few days, and now we're on the countdown for opening night against the Baltimore Ravens, when the Red and Gold postgame show can really hit its stride. We'll be doing this all season long. It'll be Dylan and I. Dylan doing a fantastic job producing things, making sure that I got all the necessary information, who's going to the podium, who's on the phone line, all that great stuff. And whether you're listening in your car, listening at home, or watching on the Twitch stream, we hope you enjoy us all season long. I know we're taking over for Josh, and Josh is a great friend of mine. He was a great mentor to me. And I know I'm filling some pretty big shoes, but we're still going to have a lot of fun all season long, and we're going to want the input from you, whether it be just commenting, calling in. There's never a bad time to interact with us right here on the Red and Gold postgame show. Chiefs fall to the Bears in the preseason finale, 34-21. They go winless in their preseason slate. None of that really matters. What does matter is opening night in the NFL, a rematch of the AFC Championship game, the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens. Mahomes versus Lamar. That's coming up here in a couple weeks. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we will roll on the Red and Gold postgame show on Sports Radio 810 WHB. all season long, right after the game. We'll have a full breakdown. And usually our regular season shows will be longer than what we have tonight because preseason football is a little bit shorter. Just like the starters are pulled early, we can use the same analogy here. Starters are going to be done, although there's nobody really backing us up. So tonight, I think that you can cover a lot of bases tonight of what we could really gear ourselves up with for the regular season. I think there are a handful of things that you go into that Baltimore matchup feeling on the fence about. I think there are some things that you feel really good about. Maybe it's the depth at the wide receiver position. That was more so on display on Saturday against Detroit when you saw Xavier Worthy really come into his own with this offense. Tonight, a little bit different of a story. You got the number 3s and the number 4s out there. And all you hope for is that somebody makes a big play. As you heard with us coming back from break, Carson Steele was the guy that made the big play tonight. With a long run that set him up for a 1-yard touchdown run, his second touchdown in the preseason. Not that his spot was in jeopardy going into tonight, but he certainly cemented it in my eyes. Now, whether he's the number 2 running back or he's the number 3 running back or he's a fullback, who knows? He's a hybrid. We know he's a hybrid. But before we went to break, we were going over a little bit of the guys that were on the bubble. And I said Derrick Prince had -3 rushing yards tonight. I think he had only 1 carry. Nico Remigio, another guy that I really liked going into the preseason games. Loved him in camp last year. Thought he was really good against Jacksonville in game 1. And tonight, I think he did do well special teams-wise. He had a return of 42 yards, I believe it was. Hardman has a return of 43. And that's also what I go back to. You know, even when Nico Remigio makes the big run and the kick return game, he pops one free, gets 42 yards. McCole Hardman one-ups him. A guy that he's battling against for a special team spot. And McCole Hardman's done this at the NFL level before. Nico Remigio hasn't. And that's what I think this is going to come down to with these roster spots. It's going to be the guys that have NFL experience. And even if they didn't play that well in the preseason or didn't get a lot of snaps, that just feels like what the Chiefs do year in and year out. No, it's going to take a lot for somebody without NFL experience to take somebody's job who's been in this offense, who's been in this system for multiple years. McCole Hardman, even though he began last year in New York, he's been familiar with this offense since 2019. Yes, he's worked with 2 different offensive coordinators, but Patrick Mahomes has been his quarterback. Andy Reid's been his head coach. That's why I think McCole Hardman probably holds on to his spot. Now, Sky Moore, we've talked about Sky Moore a lot. You've probably had conversations yourself about Sky Moore, whether you be watching with your buddies or you talk with a stranger. Maybe you're let down that every single year we go in this circle of maybe this year in a lesser role in the slot. You know, he's not taking on as much pressure. It should be easier with Hollywood out there and Rice coming back for year 2, Travis Kelce, Justin Watson. Maybe he can slide into that 5th role. We've done this song and dance many times before, but what Sky Moore has going for him is a few things here. He's 23 years old, and he's been in this offense now for 2 years. So when you contemplate somebody that has started games at the NFL level, has been on special teams for Dave Toub, what do you think the coaches are deciding? Well, unless Nico Remigio or Derrick Prince or Montrell Washington, I know last year that Washington got a few cracks in regular season games to be the punt returner because that was when nobody could catch punts. There was a severe issue in just catching punts out there. But they're going to go with the guys that have done this a lot before. And Xavier Worthy is going to be another guy that is returning punts. So that hurts Kadarius Toney's chances. You know, I am very interested in how they're going to handle the tight end room. We know the number 1, we know the number 2. But I am curious if they want to keep Jared Wiley as a 3, if they want to keep 4 tight ends because they like Irv Smith. That's another thing I'm a little bit curious about. And that's why these next couple of days are going to be really fun to follow. Because tonight was it. There are no more opportunities for guys to showcase why they belong. I mean, after all, this is a team that is about to embark on a quest that no other team has been able to reach the end goal, to get that three-peat. They know how big the target is on their back. They're not just going to hand out free roster spots because of cool stories. Luis Reid-Zammit is a cool story. He was a phenomenal rugby player. He comes over to the States, and he's tried out for a two-time defending Super Bowl champion team. And you would think, just because of how good the Chiefs are at developing talent, they can make it work. I would say right now there's a very unlikely chance that Luis Reid-Zammit makes this team. I hope they can stash him on the practice squad, but that's what I'm getting at here. I mean, you can be a guy that has a great story. You were a long shot. You were an undrafted guy. You were a practice squad guy for a number of years, and this was your chance. This is the best team in football. Sometimes they just side with the guys that have been there before. It's a business at the end of the day. And we can all like our guys. We can have our preseason darlings. We can have our training camp fascinations. But I think the Chiefs will probably be pretty boring with their roster cuts. I think they're going to keep a lot of guys that have been around for a while. And I would hope that some of the guys that we all fell in love with at camp, that were surprised by in camp, that they can be kept on the practice squad. And maybe some game down the road, when they need an extra body, or they need some help on special teams, or they need some help in the running back room, they can just go right to their practice squad, elevate them, and they can make a few plays here and there. But going into the year, I think it's going to be pretty plain, pretty boring, pretty vanilla of who they're going to want to keep. You know, you may not be as high on McCole Hardman, but the Chiefs like him. If they didn't like him, he wouldn't be here again after they had traded back for him from the Jets. And then he has the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. Let's bring him back one more time. I just, when that happened, I didn't look at McCole Hardman as a guy that was on the fence about making the roster. I think the simple fact that they went out and brought him back made me believe, okay, Patrick Mahomes wants him back, and he's going to be with this team. Sky Moore tonight, chuckling on the sidelines with Patrick Mahomes. That looks like a guy that is not concerned about his roster spot. No, and that's why tonight, when I'm watching Justin Ross and I'm watching Nico Remigio and I'm watching Cornell Powell, those are guys that I just looked at and said, man, no matter what you do, it's an uphill battle. Kadarius Toney, I had a split moment tonight where I saw Kadarius Toney have that 19 to 20 yard, catch and run. I tried to convince myself of, maybe that's something. Maybe that's something to give him a little bit of confidence, because you know how dynamic he can be when he just has the ball in his hands, but that doesn't happen a lot. But even after that second catch, I went, man, it's an uphill battle for him. If it wasn't an uphill battle, he wouldn't be out there. And that's where you have to reserve your expectations and really, what you believe is going to happen, because Kadarius Toney was going out against number 2s and number 3s, sometimes number 3s and number 4s. He should get open. He should dominate, as we said. Some of the guys on the defensive line, see them have a good rep or two, or the offensive line, blocking number 3s and number 4s, they should do well. You need them to do well. But this wide receiver room, I know, is one that everybody wants to be talking about, because you want to go over the skill positions. The skill position guys are guys that you are focused on. You want to know who's staying in that tight end room, the wide receiver room, the running back room. You might not care about who the number 2 is on the depth chart for the gunner position, or for one of the guys on kickoff team or kick return. You might not care. But those are all things that the coaching staff is evaluating as we speak. Going into the office tonight and having your last pitches, if you will, for guys you want to stay on the team, guys you feel like you can develop, guys that are going to get better throughout the season. This is your last time to to evaluate that. You'll have film tomorrow, be able to break it down a little bit more, but there's no more games to play. It's the real deal next time around. And there are some question marks around this defense, around this offense, around the special teams. Not big ones, but ones they're going to need to have answered. And I'm not sure that any of the guys that were making a push, at least in camp and the first 2 preseason games, did enough tonight. That's one man's opinion. Let us know if you disagree. You can call it at 913-381-0810. It's 913-381-0810. Or leave a comment on our Twitch stream if you got any thoughts about the Chiefs as they drop their preseason finale 34-21 to the Chicago Bears. They go winless in their preseason slate. Up next, a rematch of the AFC Championship game. The Chiefs and the Ravens at GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium. Oh, no, we're still getting used to that. But Arrowhead Stadium will be the home of the NFL opener. Chiefs and Ravens coming your way in a couple of weeks. We'll take a quick break here on the Red and Gold Postgame Show. When we come back, we got some Andy Reid audio. What did he have to say about that loss? That's coming your way on Sports Radio 810 WHB. Long run tonight. Bad to say the highlight tonight. That's not going to happen many times in the regular season. We know that. It is a weird feeling to be recapping a Chiefs game in which they were getting pummeled for 85% of that game. Like to hear 34-7, a pick six on multiple busted coverage plays. Ugh. It was not a very pretty preseason finale for Kansas City. As they lost to the Chicago Bears 34-21, they go winless in their preseason slate. Do want to get some Andy Reid audio in to get his thoughts on how he thought some of the guys performed, some of the guys he was looking to see something from tonight against this Bears team, though it was largely the backups of the Bears. But there still were some guys that Andy Reid and this coaching staff had to keep an eye on. So let's kick it off with what he had to say with his opening statement.
Did a good job in the return game. We really had good field position there. Didn't take advantage of it enough, but we had good field position. Then the fans, I was shocked when I walked out there, and I mean for a third preseason game when your starters aren't playing, I mean they were on fire. So it was great to see everybody out there, and we look forward to the Ravens game coming up here in a couple weeks, and we know this place will be geared up and ready to go. And I know our veteran players and some of those young guys, once they heal up from this, they'll be ready to go too. Really, there was not much on the injury front for you. I mean, Wanye was the primary one. He just kind of retweaked that knee a little bit, but other than that, we came out pretty clean. He's going to be okay. We just give him some time here to rest up and go. But he was doing a nice job when he had the opportunity there. With that, time's yours.
Yeah, really unfortunate for Wanye Morris. I think this has been just a bad luck camp and preseason for him. I mean, he was going into St. Joe with the hopes of beating out Kingsley Suamataia for the left tackle position. I don't really think it was a problem with ability. I think he just couldn't stay healthy. He's re-injuring things, and, a part of being the starting left tackle, you got to have good availability. You got to have durability. And Kingsley was healthy. Kingsley got the number one reps, and when Wanye Morris was out there, he got banged up. So bad luck for him, but good news that Andy Reid said he should be fine, ready to go. We have, a couple weeks here to rest up, to be one of those swing tackle guys, the guys you can plug and play anywhere on the offensive line, going in to the 2024 regular season. Speaking of Wanye Morris and this offensive line, Andy Reid had the chance to talk about what he saw from the group tonight in the loss to the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, I thought the offensive line kind of settled down after the first series or two there, and I thought we did better. And then defensively, we had some good snaps, and in there, but again, we can do a little bit better. I thought the two veteran defensive ends that are like real young, I thought they did okay. Yeah, they got some good snaps in.
The offensive line, I don't think looked that ugly tonight. There were some guys that, as Andy Reid said, settled down after the opening drive. There were a couple of times that Chris Oladokun and Ian Book were under heavy duress and had been, pushed 15, 20 yards back in the backfield, having to scramble around and make a play themselves. But still, I think for the most part, the guys that you know are going to be backups on this roster had some good reps, had some good snaps. Lucas Niang got called for a holding penalty in that first drive of the game. But after that, I think they were pretty much sound. Yes, they're going up against other reserves on the defensive line, but you can only play who's in front of you. You can only deal with the guy that is right across the line of scrimmage. And tonight I didn't really have too much of an issue with what I saw from the offensive line. Not everything was perfect, but as Andy Reid said, kind of felt like they'd settled down after that opening drive. He also had the chance to talk about the defensive line in this game. It was a rough night for the defense as a whole, so what did he have to say about some of those guys up front?
Yeah, he needed the work. He flopped around on the one, but he did a nice job on the, when he needs that. He's a good football player. He just needs to work through all this. And so we kept him in there and gave him some snaps to do that with. And I'd also tell you, Nadi, I thought did a nice job when you ask about that on the defensive line. So.
Yeah, there was one player I remember specifically where Derrick Nadi got pretty deep into the backfield, kind of forced. I don't remember which running back it was for Chicago. They were changing him around a lot in that game, but this was in the second quarter, and he had forced the ball to go outside. He had plugged up the lane, and the Bears had to run outside, and I don't believe they got that big of a gain on it. So Derrick Nadi, I think a few times, though we expect him to be out there with the starters. Maybe not if he's starting the game. He'll be in there for a lot of the early snaps, especially against the Baltimore Ravens coming up here in a few weeks. I couldn't really identify who he was talking about to open up that statement. My best guess would be Felix, because he was one of the guys out there that didn't really fit with the others. Somebody that just needed a little extra work in there and didn't make any tremendous play out there, but hopefully did enough or did what the coaching staff was hoping he would do in the limited reps that he had out there in the first quarter. But the defensive line, still a group that is going to need to have that type of depth because they'll be down Charles Omenihu, it looks like, for the first little bit of the season. So somebody else is going to need to step up either on the edge or inside on the interior. Couple more pieces of audio I want to get to, but Andy Reid did have a chance to talk about Creed Humphrey and his new extension, making him the highest paid center in the NFL.
Yeah, he's a heck of a football player. Yeah, real good football player, and he started off that way, and he's kept it going that way. So we appreciate all he does, and we appreciate having him here for this year.
Heck of a football player he is. Creed Humphrey is absolutely one of the best at his position, and now the brother of Travis Kelce, Jason Kelce, is retired from football. He might be in a league of his own, and he certainly is getting paid like he is in a league of his own. Not Carson. We'll be talking about Carson still here shortly. Maybe he will be in a league of his own here in the near future, but Creed Humphrey gets the extension right during the game. It was right at the beginning of the game. It was reported out there. Adam Schefter was on it. Already got a chance to read a couple articles on it, but Creed Humphrey getting a 4-year deal worth $72 million, making him the highest paid center in the NFL. Now we'll talk about Carson Steele, because Andy Reid had the chance to dive into what he saw from this hybrid of a football player. Is he a running back? Is he a fullback? How is he going to be utilized with this team? Well, here's what Big Red had to say.
Coach Reid, we saw Patrick Mahomes and a bunch of guys react when Carson Steele was running the ball there. It seems like he's a player that's going to fit right into your offense. What do you like?
Yeah, well, listen, we'll evaluate it, but he looked good tonight. He a physical kid, and I know the guys were excited when he was carrying it, and so. But we'll see. He's a good football player, though. He's going to. I don't think people. It didn't look like they really wanted to tackle him, so that's a plus if you're a running back.
Yeah, hard not to be impressed with what Carson Steele gave the Chiefs all preseason long. My opinion, I think he's a shoo-in to be on this roster, and I think he might be as high as the number 2 running back on this roster. Also, Kadarius Toney, as we talked about a little bit earlier on in the show, had 2 catches in the first quarter. He was out there getting some snaps, getting some reps. What did that mean for him making this roster? Here's what Andy Reid had to say.
Yeah, I wouldn't say. I mean, we went through last year with him, so we kind of know what he is. He's a talented kid, and he's in a battle to make the team and all that bit. But he's a we've never questioned the talent there at all. So it's just him staying healthy was the main thing.
I might be reading too much into it. I just didn't get a lot of confidence there that he's going to be making this roster. We kind of knew that after the game against the Lions when he's flagged twice on one play. He doesn't really make an impact offensively, not really making an impact on special teams. And all we would hear from the coaching staff is, well, he's got to get healthy. He's banged up right now. We know he's talented. Yeah, everybody knows he's talented. But if you can't stay healthy and you're hurting the team offensively, you're pushing them back with penalties, you're not doing that well in the special teams department, they're going to find somebody else for that spot. And I already think he had an uphill battle coming in, but from that, I could be very much just reading into it right here. But I just didn't get a lot of confidence there from Andy Reid. We can't get enough Carson Steele because there was still a little bit more that Andy Reid had to say on the alligator owner. We'll just call him that. That's a new nickname we'll just use for him. But here is a little bit more on Carson Steele from Andy Reid.
Yeah, well, I mean, if he stayed at Ball State, he probably would have gone down as one of the great ones, at the university there. But he transferred, and then he ended up playing there at UCLA, and that's saying something from an experience standpoint with a bigger school. But we knew he could run the football. It was his ability to pass protect and play special teams and do those things, and he's done a pretty good job with all that. So.
Yeah, I think he shined in almost every aspect. Special teams, as a running back, in pass protection. Carson Steele went above and beyond for this offense to really make a name for himself and to get him on this roster. And as I said, I think his roster spot is secure. I think he's done enough, and I think the coaching staff would probably echo that same thing. A guy that I'm just not so sure did enough to make this roster, but also was doing what many people can't do in transitioning from rugby to football and then make that roster. And it's not like he's trying to make the roster of a team that went 2-14 last year. He's trying to make the roster of a team that has won back-to-back Super Bowls and is going for a three-peat, something that hasn't been done in NFL history. But where does Andy Reid stand on Louis Rees-Zammit making this Chiefs roster?
Coach, Louis Rees-Zammit never played football before, completed his first NFL preseason. Could you assess how his preseason went?
Yeah, we tried to give him the ball a little bit tonight, and he had some real positive yards. That'll be good for him to see and study himself on that in live action like that. So, but he's a heck of an athlete, and it's just a matter of getting more familiar with it as he goes here. So, we'll see how everything works out for him.
Okay, thanks, Coach.
Yeah, go ahead. All right. Did you have a question? Okay. All right. Good.
For what it's worth, I thought that was the best preseason game for Louis Rees-Zammit. I think he's got the athleticism. I think he's a great project to work with, but we also had to understand that a project's going to take time. And he could get there at one point, just not sold that he is going to be the guy in year one. I mean, think about that. You're not just transitioning from college football to the NFL like so many rookies have to do. As close as rugby is to football, it's still a different sport. And I thought he picked up a lot just through training camp, through practice, through some of these preseason games. And I think the best thing for him, he had his best game in the preseason tonight. So there are a lot of different things he can do. I just see him on the outside looking in. But we will get the thoughts from Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com. Where's he standing on a lot of these guys that were on the bubble? Did they do enough tonight to make the 53-man roster of the Kansas City Chiefs? We'll take a quick break right here on the Red and Gold Postgame Show. Come back and wrap it up talking some more Chiefs with Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com. He's next on Sports Radio 810 WHB. with our guy, Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com. Matt, sorry for keeping you up so late, but how are we doing?
Oh, you are not keeping me up, unfortunately. I'm busy still at the stadium, so you're catching me at prime time.
Well,
I mean, just what you're hoping for after a 3-hour and 7-minute preseason game.
absolutely. I mean, it couldn't have gone any quicker, and it couldn't have been any more exciting for the better part of 3 quarters in this game, as at one point the Chiefs trailed 34-7, but they do lose 34-21. None of that really matters, right? None of that matters that the Chiefs lost this game because they're playing number 3s and number 4s out there. But I do have a couple of questions about the guys that were going into tonight with something to prove. In your opinion, Matt, was there anybody that played well enough tonight that might have been on the bubble that snuck onto the roster, or did any of those bubble guys really do enough to make the cut onto this team?
That's a magical question. I mean, you're right, Jack. I mean, I don't know that there are anyone that did. I mean, did Kadarius Toney do enough to, I think, move him from maybe being on the bubble onto the 53? I'm not sold on that. Some of the better performances, Carson Steele, already on the 53 in my mind. I don't think that was any improvement from today. It's just, I think, maybe more solidified his spot in everybody's eyes. But I think he was already on the 53. Probably I thought it was notable Andy Reid, singled him out. I think this was definitely Ian Book's best performance of his time here in Kansas City. But I don't think the Chiefs are going to keep a third quarterback, and I'm not even sure it's enough to dislodge their faith in Chris Oladokun and his experience with this team and his setting on this offense. I mean, maybe you do keep one or both those guys on the practice squad, and Ian Book certainly put some good film out there, but I don't know that anything really changed for me. I'm going to have my 53 out, and there will be some tweaks just from the last one because my last 53 came out before the week of practice this week and before last week's preseason game. But I don't know. I can't really say that tonight's game really influenced my decision that much, so I can't imagine it probably influenced the Chiefs that much.
Yeah, looking at this wide receiver room, I thought it was a little bit interesting how the snap count went. Somebody like Mecole Hardman did have 24 snaps tonight, but I don't know about you, Matt. I feel pretty confident that Mecole Hardman is making this roster, yet tonight, with all the backups, there's Mecole Hardman getting a lot of snaps. So should I read in too much to that? Is he going to be on your roster projection, or was he playing a lot tonight because he's probably not one of those guys making the roster?
Well, I mean, there's a couple of ways to look at, guys who are playing tonight, and certainly, just evaluating players that you need to evaluate and giving the backups a chance to put some, play on tape is a big part of this. But also another part for tonight is either one, there's that special category that like Jalen Watson was in, which is like you let him play because he doesn't have any preseason snaps under him. He needs to knock the rust off. You need to let him get some playing time out there because Jalen Watson looks like he's going to be your number 2 starting corner. And, they wanted him just to get some reps and playing time so he's ready for week 1, the beginning of the season. And then you got the other guys who, are probably going to be further down the depth chart and won't get that much chance to play. I mean, you want to make sure that some guys that, are going to be your maybe 5th linebacker or your 6th wide receiver, your, 8th, 9th, and 10th offensive lineman, that they get some playing time and they get some snaps because they're not going to get that much playing time, here in a few weeks. So this is their chance to kind of get that work in. And I'm guessing that Hardman and Justin Ross probably fitting into that category, especially because, especially if you look like at Justin Ross's, playing time last year, he was on the 53 all season. Never played as many snaps in a game as he played tonight. That's just the reality of his role on the team. So it's their chance to get as much work for those guys as they can. So, I think it is curious because you've got 3 wide receivers there with Ross, Hardman, and Toney that I think all had about the same amount of workload, but all 3 of them can't make the 53 because that would give you 8 wide receivers, and the Chiefs aren't keeping 8 wide receivers.
We're talking with Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com right here on the Red and Gold Postgame Show. Speaking of Justin Ross, when you look at him and you look at Kadarius Toney and you look at somebody like Nico Remigio, Who do you think has the better chance of that bunch right now? Because Kadarius Toney has NFL experience. Justin Ross, even though he's still pretty young, he's got that NFL experience compared to Nico Remigio, who Dave Tobe is pounding the table for to make this roster, but doesn't have that NFL experience. So if there was one guy of those three that looks like they're leading the charge, who would you say that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think of that kind of group, I think Justin Ross probably has the edge, and some of it you can tell a little bit, and just how they're structured on special teams. That's something that I think has definitely been kind of an indication with Remigio, is that outside of returns, I mean, he doesn't really have a role on special teams. There's nothing on coverages that he really does, or hasn't been a gunner or anything of that nature. So, and I almost feel like that it's. Hey, when Dave Tobe's saying that he would pound the table for Nico Remigio, I think he's kind of given us the clue that he has to pound the table for Nico Remigio because he's not on the 53. And I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, if you look at how the Chiefs have done special teams throughout the preseason training camp, I think even go back to OTAs, I think Dave Tobe's really pretty much signaled that he feels like Nico Remigio is one of his best kick returners and certainly one of his best 3 punt returners. And tonight, the fact that he wasn't out there with the first team, you saw some other guys getting kick returns early. I think that was an acknowledgement from Tobe that he needs to see some of the guys that are going to be on the 53 this year. So I think Justin Ross, has a spot on this team. I don't know about Kadarius Toney. I can't really get a read for what his, but I think he's on the wrong side of the bubble, and I think the Chiefs would absolutely be ecstatic to make sure that they can get Nico Remigio on the practice squad, and maybe that's been part of the strategy with him the last couple of weeks, has been to kind of limit his exposure a little bit so the teams aren't seeing him. I mean, after that punt return or kick return last week, we haven't seen a lot of Nico Remigio, so maybe they were trying to put him on ice just so other teams wouldn't say, hey, wait a minute, this kid might be somebody we want to take a look at.
Now, switching over to somebody who doesn't have to worry about a roster spot but was a talking point tonight is Creed Humphrey getting a 4-year, $72 million deal. We knew he was worth that. We knew something like that could possibly happen. But what I thought was interesting from Brett Veach in an article by Adam Teicher was that he was talking about some other young guys of we wanted to get this done, and we're hoping in the future that there's some other young guys that, we can work something out with. I have some guys in my mind that would make sense of maybe giving a contract extension to, but is there anybody that jumps off the page that after you got this done with Creed Humphrey, the next course of action should be getting this guy locked up to an extension?
I mean, there's no doubt. There's a dominoes here as far as that 2021 draft class. You want to get Creed Humphrey, you wanted to get Trey Smith, and you want to get Nick Bolton done. I mean, that's been the top of the Chiefs' offense, off-season to-do list, and now it's kind of turning into their, in-season to-do list. Those other two are not quite done yet. Getting Creed done is a big part of it because, I mean, being able to lock in that number and know how much it's going to cost to keep your all-pro caliber center for 4 years, it helps you out in those other areas. And, I think it also certainly helps you set a kind of a expectation for a deal with Trey Smith because now you know what Creed's number is. Hey, guards have been paid higher than centers the last few years. Now significantly more in the last couple of years. I mean, the market for guards has just exploded. And that was a question was going to be, what would a deal for Creed Humphrey look like? Because, centers haven't been super well paid. I mean, and obviously right now, Frank Ragnow, has the next best deal in the league at $13.5 million for a center. And this deal is for 18 for Creed. I mean, that pays him more like one of the top 6, top 10 paid guards in the league, not necessarily just the top paid center. Hey, if you're Trey Smith, can you kind of go to Brett Veach and say, yeah, I need more money than Creed Humphrey? I mean, I think that's a good number for the Chiefs. And would you sign, if you got a chance to sign Trey Smith to a similar deal, $18 million per? Would you do that? I mean, I think that would be a good deal for Trey Smith, and in particular because if you look at the free agent market next March for guards, there's a really good chance right now that if Trey Smith has a healthy season and another solid campaign, that he's going to be the best guard out there on the open market next year. And he might be in the category of $22 to $24 million a year player. So if you could lock up Trey now as a result of getting this Creed Humphrey deal done. I think that helps you, and obviously getting one of these out of the way helps as far as looking at Nick Bolton, because like I said, now you've got a number there. You know how much you have available for those other two guys from that class.
Last question for you, Matt. We really appreciate your time, and I know that preseason football is not something you truly evaluate, you want to take a lot away from, but we did open our show talking about some of the things that at least raise some eyebrows, maybe some of that depth in the secondary, Jalen Watson shaking off that rust. Going into this Week 1 game against the Baltimore Ravens to kick off the NFL season, was there anything from these 3 preseason games that gives you a little bit of concern going into Week 1, or can we just throw this all in the trash, never worried about it again, and just get ready for Baltimore and focus on it at that point?
Throw in the trash completely, no. Do you have to take the preseason with a grain of salt? Absolutely, because the Chiefs are not running anything that they're going to run in Week 1. This is all very vanilla game plans. It's pretty vanilla defense. I don't think they're doing anything terribly exotic out there. Chiefs are 0-3. Are they an 0-3 football team? No. They're a better team than their record in the preseason is going to tell you about. And you can certainly judge it by Andy Reid, because you can tell Andy Reid doesn't care about whether or not they've won or lost a preseason football game. I think there's probably some good and bad to take away. I think you saw enough in the first team offense that you're pretty excited to see what this team is going to look like when the lights are on for real and they're going up against a tough opponent. I think you really are excited to see what that looks like. There's probably a few areas to be concerned about. I think that they're, especially some of the tackling at times, and obviously the questions at cornerback are something that has to be answered. That you have some injuries. The fact that you've been playing without Chris Jones, Nick Bolton, Justin Reed, even in practice, I think that's got to give you at least a little pause, especially, Steve Spagnuolo made a great point the other day, which is that they haven't had a single day of practice in which they have had their starting defense, their starting 11, on the field at the same time. They're hoping to have that in Week 1 against Baltimore, but they haven't had it to any point this year during the season. So that's going to be a big, big test for this team, is just, what kind of, toll have the injuries taken in the first, during the preseason? What kind of toll has it taken, and is it going to affect them in the first quarter of the season?
Well, Matt, thanks so much for your time as always, and the next time we'll talk to you will be opening night, so you have a good one.
Can't wait, Jack, and I can't wait to see Dylan in just a few hours. So that's the way things roll on a Thursday night, Friday morning.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, thanks so much again. And, we can't wait until it's Chiefs and Ravens, and we have some real football to talk about.
See you today, Matt.
There you go. Take care, my friends.
See you, buddy.
There he goes. That's our guy, Matt Derrick of ChiefsDigest.com. Always does such a great job of giving us the insight and giving us his thoughts, and as much thoughts as you can give on a preseason football game. An ugly one at that, but the best part about this is that the fake games are over. The fake games are done. The next time the Red and Gold Postgame Show comes your way, which you can listen to on Sports Radio 810 WHB, or watch our live stream on Twitch, will be coming your way after every single Chiefs football game. Fake or not, which now they're all not going to be fake games. Chiefs and Ravens, Week 1 to kick off the NFL season. A rematch of the AFC Championship game. Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson.
Shout out to Carol Urban on the Twitch. Appreciate your questions on the wide receiver room, as well as Steele being on the 53 and LRZ being on the practice squad. I do agree. We should shelf him and see what he can do.
Carson Steele, as Matt Derrick said, as I said, as you said, as everybody said that was commenting, he's got a spot locked up on the 53-man roster. No and ifs or buts about it.
In pen.
Yes. Ink, Sharpie, whatever you want to say. But we are going to find out that official 53-man roster coming up here in a few days. We're almost there. We're almost to the start of the NFL season. It's going to be a lot of fun all season long. We hope you join us, whether you're listening in your car, you're listening at home, or you're watching that live stream on Twitch. We're going to have a blast. Dylan's going to be the producer. I'm going to be the host, Kyle Collier. who you are see running up and down the hall sometimes. If you're watching the Twitch stream, he's going to be with us as well, Covell Hudson. Yeah, it's going to be one hell of a football season as we will cover the Chiefs' quest for a 3-peat. But for Jack Johnson, for Dylan Michaels, we'll talk to you on opening night. You have a good one, Kansas City.